everyone. My name's Matt Sweetin. Just to say, you're definitely in the right place. Welcome to Holy Cross Felsted. You will see our little intro slide there as well. This is the interview with Holy Cross Felsted, myself, Matt Sweetin, and Nadim Ednan-Laperouse, who is with us here. We are welcoming people as they come in. We've got people coming in quickly. So we're just going to give a couple more minutes to make sure everyone's here. And we'll probably start this evening's question and answer session around 4 minutes past 8. So we'll go back to the screen share for a little bit longer, and then we'll start about 3 to 4 minutes past 8. See you shortly. Hello and welcome to this evening's interview. Nadim, thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name's Matt Sweetin. I am the warden at Holy Cross Felsted in Essex, and I'm delighted to see so many of you joining us virtually. Obviously, this is a very different form of interviewing than we were expecting to do this, but it's great that so many have joined us this evening. And as I said, thank you to Nadim. I'll introduce you formally very shortly, and look forward to hearing from you in the next few minutes. Just a few housekeeping things to start with. As I said, it's great to have you here. We're starting now, and we should be aiming to finish just at 9 o'clock or just after 9 o'clock. So we won't keep you for too long. We know there's a lot of Zoom fatigue around as well, so we will try and be prompt for you. We'll be hearing from Nadim very shortly, and the interview probably will last 35 to 40 minutes, but there will be a time for question and answers after the interview. The way to do that is you can in the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen, you can put in the questions you would like to give. They can be anonymous or they can be from you, and then we will screen them as they come through, and then I will ask Nadim the questions that we have time for. We'll probably have about 10 minutes for questions, so please feel free to put questions in the question and answers box as we go through, and I'll try my best to get through as many as we can in the time that we have available. Just to say that this webinar is being recorded, but as you know with webinars, the only people that you can see, for good or bad, is only myself and Nadim. Your pictures won't be on there at all. So this recording will be available afterwards, and we'll be able to send that to you as well. It would also be available on our church website or our Facebook page, which we'll tell you about later on. So we can't wait to start. Remember to put your questions in as they come through. And obviously, if there are any fire alarms, then there's nothing to do with me, and you should probably get out of your own house, I'd imagine, as well. But we don't have to do anything about that. So Nadim, welcome. Thank you for joining us here virtually from London, Holy Cross, Felsted in Essex. Firstly, just a bit about yourself, actually. I think it'd be good to introduce you to everyone, and then we'll kind of dive in with the interview. Now, I have a bit of a clue about what you do in your job, and we've got a clip coming up just that may give a little bit away about what you do. So with my kind technology assistant, I think we're just going to have a quick clip. Before you get too confused and think this is an advert for Wow Toys, I promise there's a rationale behind that. In fact, I've got my own one here as well, and Albert loves it, so thank you very much. Nadim, tell us, why on earth did I play that clip? How does that relate to you?
Oh gosh, well, thank you for that, Matt. So really, my background, my work life has almost my entire life been in the toy industry, and I've spent most of my working life running my own toy company that has grown over the years, where we actually design and engineer and manufacture our own toys that are specifically aimed for young toddlers, and they're educational toys that, as I think you could see, that don't use batteries, and they're pretty much indestructible. And that's what I've given my work life to, really, for the last 28 years, actually. Yes.
Thanks, Nadim. And I said we've had much fun out of them recently as well. Tell me a bit about your family and maybe where you're based at the moment.
Yeah, so we're, in many ways, I would say, well, would be a sort of quite normal, typical family, in the sense that I was brought up as a single child, so I'm an only child, and my wife Tanya is also an only child. And when we met and had children, we said, oh, we want to break that situation and have two children, and that's what we did. We had Natasha, our firstborn, and then Alex, her brother, who came a couple of years after. But we live in London, in Fulham, near the River Thames. And we've always worked and lived in the borough, so literally cycled or walked to work, and so forth. And our life, after marriage, having Natasha as our first child, we discovered something that was completely new to us. Actually, she had severe food allergies, and now that was something I never even heard of in my life at the time. We're talking now 20 years back from today, because there's in both our families, my wife or my family, there is absolutely no food allergy at all. In fact, I've never even heard of it at that time. So Natasha early on suffered from food allergies, which was something very different about our family and all the other families that we knew, our friends and so on.
And when was the first time you realised, obviously you've introduced us to Natasha, I can see some lovely photos behind you on the wall there. But when was the first time you realised Natasha had these allergies? Because I imagine it was quite a scary time at points.
Yes, I think it was the first time going back when we were on holiday, I think in Mallorca, and she was 6 months old, and we had she tried some some banana. Literally, we put some banana like that. It was the first time she's having some solids, really, and within minutes, her whole face had swollen up completely, like enormous in size, lips completely turned out, inside out, and so on. And we were just astounded by what just happened. And we rushed her to a local hospital where they actually tried to give her adrenaline injections and look after her. But that was a huge shock to us to see our child at 6 months old almost die at that point. And it really threw us, actually. And over her sort of the following years, she had one or two other what we call anaphylactic reactions. That's a severe reaction to food, which in her case was dairy, so milk proteins, egg, and also sesame seeds or nuts, which are actually very common food allergens for those families that have food allergy. So she did suffer from that her whole life, but it never defined who we were as a family, because we learned a lot about it and coped very well with it.
I'd imagine, though, as a kind of a parent of young kids, having a daughter with severe allergy must have put you, I guess, made you anxious, particularly when you may be going on holiday, going to a friend's house, maybe going out for dinner. How did you deal with those kind of events, do you think?
Yeah, so it was very unusual. She was the only child that we knew of, and certainly in her school, that had food allergies. And her friends, so primary school, or in fact nursery school and primary school, when there were birthday parties, as they would be normally, and you'd go along, etc. For Natasha, it meant often she couldn't go to any of them, because often the food would be something like pizza or something that was one of the allergens. And the families who were hosting the birthday party just couldn't really deal with the idea of making food that was different for someone else, that didn't contain one of those ingredients. I mean, that's not always the case, but that was certainly many, many times. So often we could ring at the doorbell to a party with a present in hand and a balloon like that, a little daughter, age 5 or 6. The front door would open of the house, and you hear all the noise of the children, and we would be hit with a very powerful, what we became conscious, a smell of, let's say, pizza in the air. So just the vapor of the cheese from the hot ovens that were filling up the house, in effect, could set her off into an allergic reaction. And at which point we would say, "I'm really sorry, we can't come in. We just realized now." We'd hand the present and the balloon over, and we would turn around and leave. And that was quite that happened more often than we would like it to be honest.
Yeah. I imagine trying to explain that to a young girl would have been pretty awful, really, wouldn't it, at the time?
It's true.
And tell me a bit. I imagine as Natasha became a teenager, I'd imagine obviously more independence, probably wanted to do more things on her own. Obviously, for you as parents, that would probably be more anxiety driving for you. But did she have to take precautions or carry special medicines with her during that time?
Yes, in fact, so as a family, we were very well versed in what to do if if your child has an allergic reaction, and that really is the simple medication that it relies on is adrenaline, essentially. So having what are called auto injectors with you at all times, which would be your go-to life-saving equipment, effectively, if an accident was to happen. So Natasha would carry those as a young girl with her in her own little bag. You'd call it her medicine bag, if you like. And she was very, very, completely understood that she needed to carry that with her at all times. And as she grew into becoming a teenager, so 12, 13, 14, etc., she had that always in her handbag, those medicines, always. So she was very, very adept at, handling and being very conscious of her situation with her friends. So she was very, very responsible indeed.
And how many times do you think, I mean, you don't have to give me an exact number, did you have to use the adrenaline pen, do you think, over her lifetime?
Incredibly, over 15 years that she was alive, only twice, actually. And I believe one of those was by accident as well. So really, in real terms, it was essentially once. So really not much. It was hardly something that happened all the time. Not to get the wrong idea here. Yeah. So it was very much we understood that it was the thing that you do to save your life, essentially, and therefore very, very important.
And if we can move on to obviously your holiday that you went on when Natasha, I understand, was about 15 and a half, was that correct? And you were going on a family holiday, I understand, and you were going on a plane. I don't know if you want to take up the story from there for me, a bit more about the day that Natasha became very unwell.
Yeah, so normally our family holidays would be the four of us, and we'd always usually go to the south of France because my parents had an apartment in the middle of Nice down in the south of France. So we'd usually spend a couple of weeks or 3 weeks there every year. And this time round, what happened was Bethany's best friend, Natasha's best friend called Bethany, really they wanted to have a little spend time together because as teenagers they get older, they want to spend time with their friends, not just their parents anymore. It's just a natural thing. We've all been through it. And so the idea came up that what if I took Natasha and Bethany just for like a 4 or 5 day little jaunt to the south of France, while my wife Tanya and our son Alex stayed here and had some friends come round and spend time here. So it's the first time we ever actually did something apart. And what happened, we'd booked from Heathrow Airport a flight out, the first flight in the morning out to go to the south of France to Nice. So myself, Bethany, who was 14 years old there, and Natasha, who was 15 and a half. And we were due out at 7 a.m. on the flight. But as you would imagine, getting up early, you don't have breakfast. You just basically go straight to the airport. Quick goodbyes to Tanya, who dropped us off, and then we're in the departure lounge. And then the girls are hungry. They've got rumbling tummies. So we went to a well-known chain of food places. In this case, it's called Prêt-à-Manger, which I knew very well because I travel a lot for work and eaten there hundreds of times. And the two girls picked some food that they wanted, and what that really means for Natasha, it's being very analytical, reading the ingredients labels, looking at the actual food itself for anything that she might be allergic to, any signs or signals. She'd show it to me, I'd look at it and I'd say, yeah, that's fine. That's fairly routine procedure for us. But what actually happened was a real shock, because unbeknown to us, inside the sandwich, hidden from the eye, that's crucial, and not actually marked on the ingredient label, was sesame seeds, to which she was allergic to. So both the children ate their food, and then literally minutes later, we were boarding the aeroplane, and the plane was off for a 2-hour flight. And as there we are, the three of us sitting in a row, myself and Natasha next to me, and then Bethany by the window. The two girls kind of, interacting with each other, listening with headphones, as they would be sharing music. But Natasha started to feel really unwell quite rapidly. And around, half hour, 45 minutes into the flight, 2-hour flight, started to have real difficulty breathing. So she was taking her inhaler, her asthma inhaler, and had some Piriton, which is, an antihistamine, liquid antihistamine, which ordinarily would have solved any problem that she would have had. However, none of this was having any effect, basically. She went to the toilet, to the loo, and came back a few minutes later. And that's when she showed me, lifted up her top. Her whole body was covered in really huge red welts, like a pattern of a giraffe all over her body. I was so shocked, actually, when I saw that I'd never seen that ever before. And I realized it's something really serious, actually, at this time. And she said she was having really difficulty breathing. She said to Daddy, can we go to the toilet? Can you give me the injection, the adrenaline injection? Now, I'd never done that before in my life, but I knew what to do because I watched videos and we talked about it quite a lot. So it was quite straightforward. So we quickly went to the toilet, and then I pulled her jogging pants down and injected her into her thigh, counted to 10, lifted off the syringe or the injector, looked for a blood spot, which would prove that the needle had actually gone through the skin. And I thought, wow, great. This should make everything go in reverse, basically, and everything will be fine. Yeah. But actually not at all. As a few minutes passed, she was getting worse. And she said, Daddy, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Get the second injection pen. And you always usually carry two with the second one being a backup one in case the first one failed. So I quickly ran to the seat in the middle of the aeroplane, grabbed Natasha's handbag. There was a second pen, what we call an injection pen. Went back to the toilet, all in the space of 40 seconds, and then injected her again, and went through that procedure. Her last words to me, her last living words to me at that moment was, "Daddy, Daddy, help me! I can't breathe." And she just slumped in front of me on the toilet seat, having lost, I understand now, consciousness, and I was just in shock, actually, I have to say. And I went into what I would call my mode, which is like how I would be at work, which is like so stunned, but go to like how can I put this? Become operationally driven, completely operationally driven, and try and get help, try and get the situation sorted. It was unbelievable what happened in a matter of minutes, I can only say, to see your own child who you spent 15 and a half years loving and taking care of and doing all the right things, certainly for her as her food allergies, suddenly something like that to happen. Of course, at this moment, I had no idea what was the cause of what was happening, etc. But I was aware that it was obviously something she'd eaten. Clearly, it was something to do with the food. And it was awful what then, other things continued, but, I'll let you ask the question, actually, Matt.
Yeah, sure. And obviously things weren't getting better at all, and she'd lost consciousness. And I imagine then, as you said, you called for help, and some help arrived. And what happened after that? Did you get some crew there, or were there people in the plane that could help?
Well, so I immediately called the air steward. We got her out of the toilet and put her into the jump seat, the little seat by the door where you get onto the plane. And I said, quickly get the oxygen tank. He got the oxygen. I put the oxygen mask on her. Now she was unconscious, literally slumped down. I was having to hold her up with one hand against her chest, against the wall, put the mask on her, and then they turned the bottle up, to turn it on to allow the oxygen to flow. I grabbed the bottle, I checked it was on maximum flow, so that it wasn't sort of half-half. And my science mind, because I come from a science background, I thought, okay, full oxygen flow, that will hopefully somehow, that pressurize will compensate somehow and get the oxygen through. Because I knew with an allergic reaction, what happens is your throat swells up inside, and in fact, the airways close down, restrict severely what can pass through. So I was rather thinking the oxygen would offset that, the pure oxygen. Completely wrong. I realized it wasn't working at all in effect. And I said, please ask if there's a doctor on board right now. They made a call out. A junior doctor appeared from nowhere within minutes. He'd just passed his exams the day before, right? Can you imagine? And there he was with this situation. We laid Natasha down, who was unconscious, on the floor of the plane. And we got to work with CPR and all manner of other things. This went on for the rest of the duration of the flight. So this went on for another 45 minutes or more, as we were solidly non-stop trying to keep her alive, basically on the floor. Meantime, she'd swollen up much more. And when the plane did land, the door of the plane opened, and immediately there was a rush of paramedics that came through. And in France, the paramedics are really huge guys. They're like firemen. They wear huge amounts of gear. And there was very little room in the plane for them to actually be around. But they got to work. They did the thing. I was holding up some saline solutions with a drip going into Natasha, who is now completely, almost unrecognizable as my daughter at this point visually. It was really horrific. Again, for my part, as her father, I wanted her to hear my voice. I didn't want her, even in her unconscious state, I did not want her to know that I was not with her. I wanted to know I was there. So I talked to her nonstop. Come on, baby, you can do this. You can get through this. You can pull through this. I know you're strong, etc. And I did this nonstop for about an hour, even with the paramedics working away. and they were doing such a violent CPR that they broke her ribs, and they were sweating. They were dripping with sweat, these paramedics, as they were taking in turns to do the CPR. They had linked up to a defibrillator by now, but the defibrillator was showing that she had a heartbeat, but it wasn't the right time to shock the heart. Her heart did come back, and they were so happy to see a sign of life, basically. You know, there they were over a child who was dying, and right at my feet, basically. And they were so happy, these French paramedics, that we all high-fived each other, because I speak French, so I was able to converse with them about everything. We high-fived each other, and they were like, "Great, there's a result," if you like. And then her heartbeat, her signal just disappeared, very faint. They then went forcibly for more CPR, very, very vigorous. And her heartbeat came back, basically, but much, much more faint.
Yeah.
I was just, this had been going on for over an hour and a half now, in totality. And it was grueling, is all I could say. And it was like your worst nightmare in front of you as a father, of seeing this happen to your own child. And then suddenly, what happened to me, my whole vision blanked out completely in terms of what I was seeing, except for Natasha. And 5 angels just appeared. Literally, the light, everything changed. The light changed to a soft yellow light. So the whole thing changed. It's like suddenly a painting had been put in front of me. I could see nothing but this from left to right, like that. And these 5 angels, which were like human beings with wings, just like you and I, etc., made of light, yellow light, hovering across her body from her head to the middle to her feet, basically from left to right, moving up and down like that. I was so shocked by what I saw, because I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And I also important to say, I have absolutely no faith. I didn't believe in God or Jesus or anything. I was actually really more of an atheist at this time. And I was so shocked, and it suddenly dawned on me what that might mean. Almost like, that stories we've heard, and I, with one hand holding the saline solution like that, the drips, with my other hand, I whooshed them away. I went, "It's not her time," I shouted like that. That just came involuntarily out of me, from my mouth. They all disappeared. The 5 angels went. That yellow light went, totally disappeared. Suddenly I'm seeing all of the paramedics again. They're all there. Her heart signal went completely to 0, and she was gone, basically. And all the paramedics were just looking up at me and had just given up. They were just so despondent that the life had gone. Now, this is just unbelievable, actually, in the sense that at this moment, nothing had ever happened like this in my life. Of course, with Natasha, and then this sort of supernatural situation, if you like. And I've never, ever heard of it or seen such a thing before. And it was really, really remarkable. But at the moment the angels disappeared and the light went, Natasha was gone.
And Nadim, do you think any of the paramedics or anyone else there saw the angels, or was it just you that saw them at that time?
Okay, it was just me. It was something that's me, because not that I discussed this, I should say, with the paramedics, because it was really a very, the situation was very harrowing, to say the least. They were crying. I think they were crying because they'd been trying so hard to save a life. The pilot of the aeroplane was standing opposite me in the doorway of the cab of his cockpit. He was weeping, crying, as were the air stewards and the stewardess, because this was like the most traumatic piece of theatre you've ever seen, and they've ever witnessed, actually, for all of us. But I was the only one that actually had this, let's call it, vision.
And Nadim, I can't imagine what followed in the days and weeks. And I know obviously you had to get Natasha back to England, etc., and then obviously speak to your family. But I know that when you got back to the UK, you actually went to church, didn't you? I understand. And I think you said that Natasha had been going to a church or a youth group, I think, as well. Do you want to explore that a little bit more with me?
Yeah, so Bethany, her best friend, Bethany, who was with me on the aeroplane, or with the three of us, her father actually was a pastor at a church, or had been a pastor at a church previously. So Bethany had introduced, if you like, Natasha to church in the broad sense via a church youth group on a Friday night. And for about over a year and maybe a year and a half, or more, 2 years actually, Natasha had been going to this youth group for about 3 or 4 hours every night, also on Friday nights, and enjoying that youth group with lots of other children her age and her best friend. And she really enjoyed it. And at the youth group, there were talks, every week about something to do, let's say, around the Bible, or something that's sort of spiritual, if you like. Now, I was not aware of what those were or anything. In fact, at the time, I would say before, I wasn't even interested at all, actually, because for me, God or the Bible or Jesus was not something, in my former non-Christian life, if you like, that was of any interest to me at all. So Natasha didn't discuss this with me when she was a young teenager. She talked about it more with her mum, my wife, Tanya. And Tanya had started to go to the same church as well, just really in the months before Natasha died. So Natasha did have a sort of faith, if you like, and incredibly, 2 weeks before she died, she told her best friend Bethany, "I would like to get baptized." And baptism in that sense meant actually being fully submerged in the water, in that sense. So yes, so she was someone who had a spiritual faith, I would say, Natasha, before she died. Yes.
And did you? I understand you went to her church that she'd been going to, as you said. And what did you learn there? What did you learn about God or His Son Jesus from your visiting there?
So so Natasha died on Sunday morning. The next Sunday, the following Sunday, I found myself with Tanya in a church in Wimbledon for the very first time in my life. The only other time I'd stepped foot in a church was probably for a Catholic wedding. That's about it. Other than that, I was really not someone to go to a church. I was in such distraught and emotional pain, huge pain, and I was really a lost soul and a broken person, a really broken human being, a broken man, a broken father. I would say a broken soul, really, to give that sense of how deep that was. We went to church, which was actually the church Natasha had been going to for youth group, and it was such an experience. The first few times, particularly, I remember that there were all these people, maybe 200 people or more in the congregation that I had none of whom I had any relationship with, or I knew of, or etc. I didn't know anything about them. But it turns out they had all been praying for us and our family. And they were so welcoming, actually, very, very welcoming. Not just as in a cup of tea and a biscuit. I don't mean that. I mean in a real deep sense way that they were sort of, they held me up, is what I would say. And then yet they didn't know who I was or anything about me, really. I had done nothing for them, and I didn't, therefore, it wasn't like a trade. I'd given them something and now they were giving me something back. And my life as a business person, going back to my previous, what we said before, was always about, doing trades. I give you something if you give me something in return. And that was really what we call normal business interaction. But in this instance, this was something being offered to me for free, if you like. And it was so overwhelming. It was a huge sense of love. And it made me feel very welcome in a place as a broken person. And then listening to things like preachers or sermons, none of which I'd done in my life before. I found it, I was listening. I was broken. I was listening to what, our pastor was saying, talking about the Bible and stories in the Bible. And I have to say, found it really meaningful quite quickly, very meaningful. And these are things I'd never even heard of before, by the way. It was all new to me completely.
And Was there anything that particularly struck you there, or was it just kind of everything was new and different for you?
Yeah, I think the big thing that really struck me actually was something that was new to me, and it was that it was all about Jesus, essentially, all about Jesus' forgiveness, essentially, and how when Jesus put together a group of people that were his disciples, that we would commonly call Paul, Peter, and so on, every single one of them, none of them were perfect. Not even perfect. They were far short of perfect. In fact, some of them were great. They were potentially murderers and sinners of all sorts. So it was really like an unusual group of people. And I began to see through the teachings that Jesus, this was not just a mythical person. It's a real man, God in the man's body that came to earth, and there's plenty of evidence of his existence. It's not just a fantasy. It's a well documented and proven thing. And this man, is God, Jesus, if you like, had pulled together these people who really lacked hope, and he was trying to give hope, basically, to people. Give happiness to people, in effect, and saying, you are my children. Believe in me. And as a broken soul that I was, who had always relied on doing everything in my own strength, it was me, myself, and I. If something is going to happen in my life, it's because I'm going to make it happen. And what had just happened, my child had died in front of me, and I could do nothing about it. I was not able to do anything as her father or as a human being. So my sense of control, if you like, was completely cut from underneath me. And I began to see at church that it was the love that was there of Jesus on people, irrespective of their backgrounds and the sins and the terrible things they may have done. The door, his church, being open all the time for the worst sort of people that I would normally say, oh, they're terrible, you shouldn't allow them in church. That sort of attitude, you might say. But actually, they're exactly the people you need to have in church. The wounded, the broken, if you like. The church is not meant for perfect people. And none of us in this 200 congregations, I got to know them, were in any way perfect. They all had their big issues in life. So I found this great sense of love, like being washed with love. And that allowed me, again, to forgive myself, because I felt very responsible for Natasha's death as her guardian and as her responsible keeper, knowing everything that I know about her and loving her, and I wasn't able to save her. That bared very, very heavily on me as a man. And I was suicidal for some time, and looked seriously twice at killing myself, because I couldn't bear the pain and the weight of it on my shoulders. But church helped me realize you can talk to God, speak to God, and ask him for help. And that I started doing, really from my heart, because I was in such pain. And God answered. God literally answered and came through, not just for me, but for my family. And it radically changed, what was going to happen next.
Nadim, I think as we come to the last 10 minutes of the interview, I'd love to explore that. You mentioned hope, you mentioned control, maybe just to think about that a bit shortly. But I know you talked about going to church, but on the other side as well, you set up something called the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, and we've got a clip here just to explain a bit about it. And in fact, all the ticket sales tonight are going towards that, which is a great cause, because obviously there were some big legal things that you wanted to do. So we're just going to play a quick clip from that, and then I'll just ask you a few questions about that.
Hi, I'm Tanya.
And I'm Nadim, and we are both Natasha's parents and the founders of the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation.
The Natasha Allergy Research Foundation has been set up as a legacy to our daughter who we lost from anaphylaxis, and it's been set up to fund really important research into allergies and to look for a cure and to educate and raise awareness of allergies in our society. We decided to set up Natasha Allergy Research Foundation because we felt there was a real lacking in this country of funding for research into allergies. And until the death of our daughter, it feels that there hasn't really been a voice for people, and certainly there hasn't been much emphasis put onto research in this country.
So, as a family, we suffered a devastating tragedy with the death of Natasha, aged 15 and a half years old, which was really shocking. And all this as a result of poor food labelling on prepackaged foods. And it brought a real awareness to us, I think, didn't it, that there was something really, really wrong in this country with food labelling laws, and furthermore also the way that people with allergies were treated by food retailing businesses, and also a great lack of understanding about what food allergies really are in society.
When a child is allergic to food, a food that is completely commonplace to anybody else is a poison to that child or even that adult. And just a tiny minuscule amount of that food can potentially kill them. It is so dangerous. So research into this is woefully underfunded, and we really see it as a big issue, and it's been described by some researchers as a potential tsunami of allergy suffering in this country, and it's just going to get worse. So we need to start looking into finding a cure now, not tomorrow, not next year, not in 20 years' time, but right now. We never want this to happen again to anybody. What we've been through as a family is just so terrible, and nobody should die from the food that they eat. And so please do support us, and we will do everything we can to find that cure, and we can do that together with your help. Thank you.
So a nice summary clip there, actually. Nadim explains a bit about the foundation named after Natasha. I'd love to explore lots of that with you if I had the time. Being a medic myself, I've got lots of questions I'd love to ask. But tell me a bit about October 2021, because something big is going to happen then, I understand. What's changing then?
Yeah, so October 21, so this year will be when Natasha's law, which passed through Parliament a year and a half ago, Natasha's law passed through Parliament, was signed off by the MPs. What it means is it's a food, it's all around food. It'll mean that all the food retailers and businesses that sell sandwiches and various foods in packages, etc., will have to, by law, actually list the full ingredients of that product and highlight anything that's considered allergenic, the 14 allergens in that. So things like milk, dairy, eggs, sesame. Whereas up until this point, and what happened to Natasha is she died completely unnecessarily, or avoidable death, as it say, because the ingredient labeling on the sandwich was only a partial ingredient labeling. It didn't contain everything, but we weren't to know that. We had absolutely no idea that was the case, because we really rely, as an allergic person, on labeling of, accurate labeling of foods. And in this case, there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of sandwiches and food products that are sold with either no labeling, partial labeling, or even incorrect labeling. But there would be no law that was governing that situation to actually make people or businesses be more responsible about that. And it was all the more incredible that it was a very large sandwich chain, in this case Prêt-à-Manger, which is £1.5 billion turnover, actually were operating in this way. It really, a real shock. And the result of that is, of course, the law wasn't there at the time to protect people like Natasha. And in this case, Natasha, paid for that with her life. So in October 21, Natasha's law comes out, which will affect thousands and thousands of retailers in the United Kingdom, including Tesco, Morrison's, all of them, where they'll have to comply.
Which, again, out of such tragedy, but it's a brilliant result from that point of view, because actually having looked at the website, you've got, quite poignantly, a lot of faces of a lot of young people that have either been affected severely, or some of them sadly died because of allergy, like Natasha. And I remember you shared with us that you've been to some of these inquests, and you hear the same thing again and again, don't you, I think?
Yes, that's right. I think, it's really important in life to learn and to listen, and to be really compassionate, to have a compassionate heart towards what I would now call, my brothers and sisters in Christ. All the people who are listening. I would say honestly, I'll do anything for you. As my brothers and sisters, really now. And that's not something I would have said a few years ago, if you like. I would have said, "What are you going to do for me first?" But now I really appreciate, through the learning of Jesus, which has come to me through the church, that actually, it's what you do for others that really counts, actually, and that's what God would want you to do. And so through the charity, Natasha's charity, what we're doing is we're saying enough is enough, basically. Things need to change. There are 2 million people in the United Kingdom with severe food allergies. That's now 1 in every single class in every single school in the United Kingdom. That's a big number. And Tanya and myself have been going to a number of inquests into the deaths of other children and teenagers from food allergies. And we're learning what needs to change. And so we basically are campaigning hard. I say hard, meaning, with hard, what I mean by that, not in our own strength. I must say that we actually ask God to come and help us. It really is something from the heart. So this charity, Natasha's charity, it's got a Christian faith attitude to it, basically. When we've met with government ministers, and we're talking the most senior ministers there are after the Prime Minister, we've actually talked about God at the meetings and said, we're going to allow God to be in the room. What would you want? What would God want us to do right now? What is the right thing to do? And by sort of putting our faith into Jesus or God in this way, we ask, help us to do the right thing. And if we really believe that God's helping us to make these incredible changes, because I can, myself and Tanya and our trustees, we actually say, we don't have the strength as just one man, one woman, or whatever, to make these changes. It's such a huge change. Only God can do that. And that's why we give a lot of our campaigning to God. We actually pray on it. When I write a letter, like recently to some of the senior people in government, I'll pray, give me the words, Lord, and it will be done. And but we've got a lot of things we want to do, particularly in medical research, because the United Kingdom, there's no doubt about it, has some brilliant minds, in medical minds and researchers, and we're going to help fund them, basically, to tackle the big issues. And that's how we want to solve the problem. But we absolutely ask for God's help every time.
And Nadim, as I said, I'd love to explore it more with you. Having been a trainee myself, and we've got very poor training in allergy, I must admit. You learn on the job, and actually, I'm sure a lot of medical folks share the same. So actually, educating the medical fraternity would be great. I do advise people to have a look at the website. Actually, it's very useful. It tells of the latest research and what's going on and where and how the money is used, actually, which is really helpful. As we close, Nadim, you brought us back to God again, and I'd like to do that as we close here. I just want to ask you 2 final questions before we go to the question and answers. What difference does it make to you when you've put your faith in Jesus? What difference does it make to you now you've put your faith in Jesus?
That's a great question, because it makes every difference. And let's see if I can put this in a way. Having faith in Jesus, for me, if I say, it's like having the ultimate freedom. It's literally removing all the weight of anxiety, all the weight of worries, all the weight of trying to achieve things but never getting there, then being disappointed. All those frustrations that I think we all live with, if we're honest about it, in the way we conduct our lives. Giving it to Jesus, as I say, asking for that help, and accepting the outcome one way or another. It's incredibly liberating, actually. And it might sound to many people counterproductive. Well, if you're giving it to someone else, you're not being in charge of it. Well, that's actually the point. We are really the messengers, we would say, doing God's work, if you like, to try and save other people's lives, especially the children. Really, children shouldn't be dying in this way. But we give it to God, and we let God kind of work through us. And that is what it means, having that relationship, or that feeling about Jesus. And it's very, very empowering. There is to put this in context, 1 minute I'll be talking to Prince Charles, next minute to somebody who is homeless, next minute to the Prime Minister, and so on and so on. And all of this, which I'm not used to, by the way, really, I pray on it before, and I am totally calm and fine with it. And you could not believe the positive outcomes that come from being essentially humble and asking God to do the work for you. It's a leap of faith, you could say, but it really, really works. Having from your heart, genuinely, that belief that Jesus is with you and for you and wants you to be happy. And that's what you get. You find your life, I find my life much more happy. Our marriage, which we've spoken about it since Natasha's death, was highly likely to fall apart. In fact, it's very common for marriages to fall apart when a child dies. That was never going to happen with God in our life. He's brought us strongly back together and made us a much better family for it.
And Nadim, as we close, and you mentioned Natasha again, what difference does it make to you and Tanya knowing that Natasha followed Jesus or believed in Jesus?
Yes, it does make quite a difference. So my understanding, and bear in mind that I'm not somebody who's a theologian. I'm just a simple man speaking from my experiences and sharing truthfully what I have seen and heard and experienced. Knowing that Natasha had a faith and believed in God and in Jesus, it does matter a lot. It makes complete sense to me now in my new logic, if you like, my new way of thinking, that those 5 angels were given for me to see, basically, by God, essentially, so that I would know that my child, Natasha, has actually gone to heaven. So her soul now is in the most ultimate place I say the world, it's maybe not of this world, but in the ultimate place, heaven, an amazing place. And I don't doubt that Jesus was probably there or is there and welcomed her in, if that's how I think about it, if you like, how we think about it. And that means I know our daughter, is in a wonderful place, actually free from food allergies. I would say living the next life, if I call it that, the eternal life of amazingness, really. And it makes myself and Tanya, really happy to know that when we die, as we surely will all die, we believe through our faith that we will go to heaven and we will join and meet with our daughter, Natasha, again. And we will hold her, I say metaphorically speaking, hold her again. But beyond that, I am so excited, actually, even when I say this, I can feel tingling in my fingers about it, that when I go to heaven, I will see Jesus and meet Jesus. I absolutely feel that and know that. And I can't wait to hug him. I say hug him and say, oh, Father, you've always loved me. You looked after me. You've helped me so much in my life, as I've been telling you now. And just want to hold him and feel that warmth and that love. And I can't wait for that time. It sounds strange to say it, but that's true, actually.
Nadim, it's been a joy to interview you. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday lockdown night with us here at Holy Cross Felsted and others joining from various places. We will do some question and answers. I think it's good just to reflect on what Nadim has said, that if you are interested, if you are thinking bigger things, maybe COVID's got you thinking, maybe Natasha's story has got you thinking as well, then there are lots of resources out there. We at Holy Cross Felsted would love to explore the Bible with you, to explore the bigger questions of life, as Nadim was thrust into that light, wasn't he, as he told his story. So there's a short clip coming up from something called Life Explored, where we ask those bigger questions, and you can feel free to join us this Thursday coming on Zoom at Holy Cross Felsted. So we're going to play a short clip and then we're going to have a few questions. Now, if you'd like to ask any questions to Nadim, please put them in the question and answer section at the bottom of your Zoom. Click there and you can ask some questions there, and then I'll ask them to Nadim. We'll see how far we get. I've overrun by a few minutes, and I hope it's all right that we will finish by 9:05 as we started about 8:05. So let's just watch a quick clip just to help me get bits together, and then we'll have about 10 minutes of Q&A.
Apologies, just coming.
Thank you. As I said, please feel free to join us. If you have some of those bigger questions that you'd like to explore or answered, then you can join myself and my wife Michelle 8 o'clock this Thursday on Zoom. We've got a few questions in the question box, Nadim, so you're in the hot seat for a little bit longer, if that's okay. First one to kick us off really is, how did God help you from the emotional point of view to really deal with Natasha's death, particularly as said in the aftermath of her death? And because you talked about being suicidal, you talked about having some really horrifically low moments. How do you think God helped you during that?
Yes, so I think the way I look at it is the suicidal thoughts, are very much based around self-loathing and not loving yourself, and the sense of no self-worth or very little self-worth as a human being. Because of the pressure, I suppose, as a father, as a human being, as a man, that I've always, put myself under, if you like, I felt I'd really let everyone down. Of course, my child, but my family, everyone around me, and I was very, very critical, if you like, in that sense of myself. Not so much that I went over things in my mind, said I should have done that and I didn't do it. For example, it was just that it had happened on my watch, and I think through church, or the experience of going to church and and learning, particularly, I think it's very important to say about learning as well, about what God, Jesus, has as a plan for us, in terms of the whole of the world, if you like, was actually, you should love yourself, do love yourself, be forgiving to yourself, because if you're not forgiving yourself, then you can't forgive other people, and that forgiveness can't flow through you to other people. And I realized, as much as the horror of what had happened to our family, nothing worse, frankly, could have happened, really, that forgiveness was an open door for me, because God said, it's okay, and realizing that in one hand, with the other hand, that knowing my child was in heaven, because I'd been given the sign of those 5 angels to show me visually, physically, literally, I would say physically, that's the signpost. She's gone that way. She's gone to heaven. The pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, effectively, around the whole story, I started to see this world of what God would want for me, and so I was being, I suppose, gently washed each week by going to church and interactions with more understanding. And I became, I suppose, slightly kinder to myself. And through that process, that actually lifted the feeling that I should kill myself, in fact. And I realized, as a human being, a child of God, just like we all are, I had a lot to be able to give and help other people. And if I wasn't on this planet alive, then I couldn't do that. And if you like, the mercy and the grace of God that was given to me could not flow through me and through my hands and my mouth to help other people. And I think all of us would say, when you help other people, it's a great feeling, isn't it? It's much better than grabbing and taking something from them. Helping them, you don't do this for money, you do this because it comes from your heart. It really is a very positive thing that lifts you up. And I think, God wants you to do that. And all of that in the mix of what I just said took away, if you like, my sense of wanting to kill myself. So I was washed with all of that.
Thanks, Nadim. That's helpful. It kind of leads me on to the next. There's two questions that I think we'll put together, if that's all right. One way of looking at things is, I guess, which is very common particularly after you've lost a child, is you're angry with God, and in a sense, really angry with
Yes.
God. Did you go through that phase? Were you angry with God? Was it an issue? And I think probably to tag on to that, why do you think God didn't save Natasha? Now that's probably a big question really as well, but they may go together, being angry with God, but couldn't have God saved Natasha as well?
Yes. Well, so I was very angry with God. I mean, after, even though I've been telling you that I was going to church, which is true, absolutely true, there was also a flip side to that as well. I would have enormous amounts of rage. And sometimes in the evening here at home with Tanya, my wife, and my son, I would swear full of expletives, blaming God for taking my child when he could have saved her. That was the feeling. And I was very, very foul-mouthed indeed, and so on. And that was like in fits of rage, would wash over me uncontrollably, and then there would be calm, if you like. But I passed through that, actually. And in fact, it's worth saying, I passed through that in such a way that I've never sworn again. God has literally taken the words from me that in the last years, I don't swear at all anymore. And I have to say, I come from a background of swearing, by the way. It was very normal for me to throw in words in conversation like that. But that's all gone from me now. And I suppose I'm not one in any way, and again, this is through my bigger understanding, if you like, the broader, to challenge God in any way. It's not my place to say, why didn't you save her this time? You saved her before when she had an allergic reaction. She could have died, arguably, as I've said before, when she was 6 months old or in between. This time you took her. Why did you do that? But as I've really understood, again, that we really do live in a broken world, and that is why so much more we need God's help, actually. We need to go to the Father and hold his hand and be led by him all the time. Not just on a Monday or a Tuesday, but every day of the week, night and day. So I don't in any way, for example, blame God in any way at all. And it would be, I would say, be wrong for me to do that, really. But nor do I blame any other human being on this earth either. I did initially, and it's worth saying I did blame the CEO of the company completely, but through going to church, if you like, and understanding more about forgiveness, I realized that I realized that God ultimately always gives justice. It might not be in the time frame that you want as a human being, but justice will be done, and it's full of it in the Bible. No one can say otherwise. But when I had a meeting with the CEO of that company a few months later, I actually put my hand on his chest, this hand here on his heart, and this hand on his shoulder. And I looked him in the eyes and I said, I forgive you. I forgive you for the death of my child. And I said to him, I know you as a man are a father of 2 daughters. I'm forgiving you so that you can be the best father to your children, and your family and what is to come from here on, this traumatic, can be as best as it could be. But that wasn't to take away the justice piece. That was to forgive him. And by forgiving him, I was also able to have forgiveness for myself it flowed through me, and that meant I didn't harbor or hold on to any kind of revenge or anything. And I think that's really instrumental in the whole big picture of all of this.
Nadim, it's 9:05. Thank you so much for answering the questions. Sorry, I know there's more questions there, but I want to try and keep us to time if that's okay. Nadim, leads me to say really thank you so much for spending your evening with us here at Holy Cross. Thank you for letting us record this, and as I mentioned at the start, the recording will be available on the church website, and we may be able to send it out to you on email as well. So it's 9:05. Thank you for coming. Do look at Natasha's foundation, the web page there. Do look at the Holy Cross web page, and if you want to find out more, please do look at that Life Explored course coming up. So Nadim, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, as I said, for spending time with us, and we wish you well. We wish Natasha's foundation well as well. And thank you for encouraging us here at church and challenging us and making us think about the bigger things really as well. So thank you, all of you that's joined us here on this webinar. It's 9:05. I'll say good night to you and take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.